As our nation's Democrat-run cities implode, President Trump has a plan to restore law and order, and he's not alone. We're going to see how red states are starting to strip Democrat mayors of much of their political power, all as more people than ever are leaving our nation's cities and increasingly guaranteeing the eventual and inevitable demise of the Democrat Party. The nation was stunned over the weekend by images coming out of the imploding city of Chicago. For the last 4 nights in a row, police were forced to call in reinforcements downtown as massive numbers of teens gathered to riot and loot businesses. They destroyed parked cars. There were even reports of shootings. It was yet the latest example of Chicago's social degeneration. In the past few years, violent crime and murder rates have skyrocketed in the city just months into the first and only term of Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Downtown residents were literally panicking as the crime rate soared throughout the city. In one weekend alone, 54 people were shot in a single weekend. In the aftermath of the George Floyd riots, parts of Chicago were more or less completely overtaken by lawless thugs, rioters, looters, and BLM radicals. At one point, there was nothing less than a full invasion of what's called Chicago's Magnificent Mile, which is Chicago's premier commercial district made up of upscale restaurants and posh hotels where hundreds of thugs reportedly swept through, and other parts of downtown Chicago smashing windows, looting stores, confronting police. Now, what's happening in Chicago, as you know, is just par for the course of Democrat-dominated cities across the nation. Look at this relatively recent headline from the New York Times. With homicides rising, cities brace for a violent summer. And the byline reads, homicide rates in large cities were up more than 30% on average last year and up another 24% for the beginning of this year. And what's so bizarre is that this all appears completely self-inflicted. Defund the police mayoral candidates are winning, Soros-backed DAs are winning, and their cities are imploding. But the good news in all of this is that as the big cities really are dying as a result of these progressive policies, they're ironically losing their political power. And that's because there's currently a massive demographic shift going on that's moving political power away from big cities and relocating that power to rural exurbs. Scholars note that this is a process known as deurbanization, where populations are fleeing the cities en masse. So, for example, a couple years back, a study came out on the spending activities of over 100,000 credit card holders who lived in 2 cities, San Francisco and Manhattan. The study estimated that 45% of Manhattan residents and 55% of San Francisco residents left their respective cities right after COVID, many of whom have never returned. Chicago has less people today than in 1920. New York has less people than 1950. Baltimore has less than 600,000, the lowest in a century. They're calling it the Detroitification of our cities. New York, LA, Chicago, they're all losing hundreds of thousands of residents. So populations are increasingly moving to more rural exurban areas and embracing the conservative values as mechanisms of resistance and protection against the degenerating progressive values that so thoroughly destroyed our cities and caused them to leave. But the problem for the political left is that with this massive demographic decline in our cities, they're ironically losing their political power on the national stage because cities are all that liberals got. They've basically lost American counties. The left is virtually entirely an urban political base. According to a study by the Brookings Institute, back in 2008, Democrat voting districts encompassed 39% of U.S. land area as compared with the 61% expanse of Republican districts. By 2018, that number changed dramatically. Democrat voting districts imploded just 20% of the map. Republicans now dominate 80% of the nation's land area. The Democrats have become almost entirely an urban metropolitan party. And so what we have to understand is that this deurbanization is an existential threat to the Democrats' power, in that it's basically draining their sole source of votes. But it gets worse. Now President Trump is putting forward a plan to basically take over depleting cities and restore law and order, and he's not alone. You're going to absolutely love this. But first, gang, you have got to click on that link below and try for yourself the brand new technology behind MyPillow 2.0. It's amazing. Mike Lindell's completely outdone himself with a new fabric temperature regulating technology that keeps you comfortable all throughout the night. You're going to absolutely love this. I know I do. And you get the same amazing savings as always if you use promo code Turley. A classic MyPillow is normally $69.98, but if you use promo code Turley, you'll get that same classic MyPillow for just $19.98. And that applies to over 200 products in their catalog. So don't wait. Click on that link below. Give the gift of comfort and warmth to yourself, to loved ones. Support one of America's most amazing patriots, Mike Lindell, and get the best savings ever. Click on that link below right now. At the CPAC speech several weeks back, Trump advocated sending in the National Guard or the U.S. military to restore order in the midst of our imploding liberal cities.
In places where there is a true breakdown of the rule of law, such as the most dangerous neighborhoods in Chicago, the next president should use every power at his disposal to restore order. And if necessary, that includes sending in the National Guard or the troops. Every American of every background deserves to live in safety and in peace. Every American. One of the things that we were saddled with, and one of the hardest decisions I had to make when I looked at some of these cities that were run by Democrats going so bad so fast, I wanted to send in the Guard, I wanted to send in the troops, and sometimes I did. In Minneapolis, I sent in the troops and saved the place. I was getting ready to send them in Seattle when, if you look at, I guess it was Antifa, took over a big portion. You don't read about that too much. Nothing happened to those people, or very little. I think nothing. But they took over a big portion of Seattle. The troops were ready to go in, and they heard that. All of a sudden, they decided to leave. Thank you very much for leaving. But, you know, the president is not supposed to be doing that. The president is supposed to do it at the request of the governor. Well, when the governor was a Democrat, or the mayors are Democrats, they don't want any help under any circumstances.
Now, what's so interesting there is that Trump has been touting this proposal ever since. At another speech, he said this.
And where there is a true and total breakdown of law and order, where citizens' most basic rights have been violated, then the federal government can and should send the National Guard to restore order and secure the peace without having to wait for the approval of some governor that thinks it's politically incorrect to call him in.
So you can see this is becoming a repeated emphasis for Trump. The United States federal government is going to have to go in and clean up the societal rotten mess that liberal mayors and governors have made of our cities. And Trump isn't alone. Look at this. The great state of Texas has begun to crack down on their liberal cities. The Republican supermajority there is passing laws that will basically strip their cities of their jurisdiction to enact laws not approved of by the state. So they're taking aim at progressive judges and prosecutors. They're slashing local officials' emergency powers and broadly restricting the types of regulations cities can enact. Basically, what Texas is doing is they're forcing their deep blue cities to live by and abide by the exact same laws as the rest of the state laws that are, of course, deep red in their orientation. So any environmental laws, any attempts at defunding the police or relaxing crime prevention laws, all of that would be stripped away from their cities if they contradict state statutes. They're basically stripping their cities of their self-governing status when all's said and done. And again, it's not just Texas. A number of governors and legislators in red states are stripping their big city mayors and city councils of much of their power to regulate their urban areas in a manner not consistent with red state values. Of course, one of the more explicit ways they've done this, in red states in particular, is the passing of total abortion bans. Abortion facilities are already basically banned from 90% of our counties in our nation. It's almost entirely an urban industry at this point, but now blue cities inside red states are seeing their abortion facilities getting shut down. But this is just the tip of the iceberg in the various ways in which red state governments are starting to crack down on their deep blue cities and force them to govern in compliance with red state law. So all this is to say that we may indeed be seeing our imploding Democrat cities getting squeezed in two directions. De-urbanization is depleting their political base, all the while Trump and red states are starting to crack down on their ultra-liberal policies and lawmaking. Let's hope that this full court press not only restores order in a number of our cities, but effectively neutralizes the Democrats' sole power base as well. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You'll definitely want to check out my latest video on woke Bud Light caving. They're surrendering as their CEO admits defeat. You're not going to want to miss this, so make sure to click on that link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.